Hello and welcome to Sharon Local History. In this video I want to tell you a little about our recent hike, which was collaboration of Sharon Historical Society and Sharon Friends of Conservation and Sustainable Sharon Coalition. It was hike at Audubon Sanctuary, and we basically walked to this property, which is a barn at Billings Court. Here you will hear more information about Audubon from two guys who are very familiar with Audubon and Moose Hill, Sean and Mike.
Okay, the Massachusetts Audubon Society was founded in 1896 when Boston residents Harriet Lawrence Hemingway and Minna B. Hall formed a group to discourage ladies of fashion from wearing the brightly colored feathers of non-game birds in their hats. A market had caused the birds to be hunted almost to extinction. Recruiting leading ornithologist William Brewster as their first president, the group became the first state Audubon society in North America. Headquartered in Boston, it was instrumental in the passage of the 1897 Massachusetts law outlawing trade in wild bird feathers and the 1900 Lacey Act, prohibiting interstate shipment of animals killed in violation of local laws. The group also helped to organize National Association of Audubon Societies, incorporated in 1905. Which later became the National Audubon Society. Mass Audubon opened their first sanctuary, right here, Moose Hill, in 1916, initiating its mission in land stewardship, as well as birds and wildlife protection. In the 1930s and 40s, Mass Audubon began to emphasize education, establishing natural history programs for schools and day camps, training teachers and offering programs for children and adults. The organization began its program of professional research in 1956, with a scientific staff and laboratory facilities that by the 70s and 80s specialized not only in endangered species, but environmental issues such as pesticides, water pollution, wetlands protection, and energy conservation. Today, Mass Audubon is the largest conservation organization in New England. It maintains over 50 field offices and wildlife sanctuaries that serve as a base for nature and environmental education courses, programs, scientific research, and conservation-related activities. It protects over 40,000 acres of open space from the Berkshires to Cape Cod and the islands, publishes a nature magazine and newsletter for more than 100,000 members, and actively advocates for conservation laws and planning at local, state, and federal levels.
Thank you, Sean.
Okay, there's some conflicting stuff. All right, so people have been here, right? Raise your hand if you've been here. Yeah, of course you have. Okay, so this sanctuary established in 1916, 300 acres at that time on Moose Hill Street. 1916, when the board accepted an offer from the Sharon resident George Field. Hold on, George Field. You want to see George Field?
Botany, right?
George Field, professor of botany, and wait a minute, here's a picture of the guy.
And lived just down the road here.
He lived right down the road.
The house was yellow, is now grayish, slate colored.
Here's George Field. Okay, so George Wilton Field, the professor, planted a lot of stuff here and all kinds of things too, okay? As a bird sanctuary, set it up as that, but planted lots of different strange things.
Yes.
The sanctuary is now 2,200 acres, and not 1,000 original, well, let's skip that. Okay, there are lots of trails for hiking in the fire tower in an old barn. And this summer, children go to day camp. Woo! Yeah, to learn about nature. There are presentations about maple sugaring in February and March and things like that too. Okay. The adjacent, I'm going to skip over here. The adjacent Moose Hill Farm, trustee's property, is over there, over that side. The Nature Center, here's the Nature Center, was acquired in what year? Take a guess. Huh? I thought he was going to tell me the information. 1990. And as I've learned, I got to tell you, and this information, I don't know where this came from, the book where this stuff was photocopied from. In 1932, the Kendalls had said, well, we're going to give this over, but it didn't happen until 1990. And so camp, I know, started over there for a long time in the 40s kind of thing. Then it moved here when Kay Anberg was here. So really, 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 really neat. So the center displays of rotating exhibits throughout the year, great educational kind of stuff Sean puts together and other people put together. The sanctuary consists of habitats, forest, freshwater marsh, meadows, eskers, kettle holes, vernal pools. Really great. Over 160 species of birds have been observed on the property. And Moose Hill Farm, a lovely place along the way, is also a protected area, since being deeded to the town as part of a Nature Conservancy and Historical Preservation area in 2004. Did we read this right? No. It operates in conjunction with this sanctuary to protect several hundred acres that have been agriculturally active since the 1600s. Long time. a culturally significant local landscape, old stone walls, estate trees, the remnants of an orchard, and a fine collection of old farm buildings trace an important part of the local history.
Thank you. So after this introduction, we were hiking towards Billings Barn, and whenever we saw something interesting, we would stop and we would talk about the nature, about botany, about whatever animals we saw, and we also included some history. So right here we were talking about the worms and basically how active they were after all that rain we got. From the main office, we walked on Billings Loop, which is easily to follow and easily marked, and we came to the barn. On the way there, we talk about the stone walls as well as sheep enclosures that were present, and Sean and Mike also mentioned the how basically the sheep pastures are being turned back into a forest. So here's a map from 1888, and the arrow is pointing to L. Billings, which is where the arrow is pointing right here. This is map from recent years. And when you come to the end of Billings Court, you will come to this barn. So there's a picture from 60s and the new one after renovation. This property is the homestead of Leonard Lorenzo Billings. He was a veteran of the Civil War. The house is gone, the farm, the homestead burned down. However, I believe Leonard Lorenzo Billings purchased this property in 1880 for his father, and when his father died, he moved in with his wife and her two daughters in 1910. He married rather later in his life. However, when he was young, he was very active. He really wanted to join the Civil War. So I believe at age 16 he actually wanted to join. However, he only had 112 pounds. So he was rather petite, but eventually he did join the war and he was quite accomplished. I will post an incredible article about him in the comments under the video. The house is long gone, but I will also include some pictures how the farmland looked like before. I do love those before and after pictures. If you come and hike here, you can be quite impressed with the large pastures. You can admire the stone wall, and of course you can admire those two sugar maples that we like to call Martha and George. They are believed to be over 300 years old. Sean will tell you a little bit more about them. So if you go hiking to Billings Court, this is just really 10-15 minutes from the parking lot. Do think about the history and who lived here and how important this person was. By the way, he was a very interesting man who was involved with the training of the 35th Regiment, which was a regiment of colored troops. So when he was 97, Billings decided to retrace his Civil War service and started a 2,000-mile motor trip south to visit the battlefields where he spent time as a young man. His daughter came with him. Unfortunately, he did die in Charleston, South Carolina on October 22, 1939, and he was brought back to Sharon. His funeral was a big deal. He is buried at Canton Corner Cemetery. Sugar mapling was always a big deal at Moose Hill, and here are two incredible sugar maples.
300. Several years ago, we had an arborist come in, I guess it was right before I got here.
Bull spender! Yay!
About 8 years ago. And he determined that they're late 200s, closing in on 300 years old.
Wow. So those are sugar maples?
Those are two sugar maples. They're still producing. They're doing pretty well. The farther one suffered a limb injury a couple years ago in a storm during the summer, but it's still going pretty well. And we think that there's a chance that they're wedding trees. So there was a tradition, mostly from Northern Europe, when couples married and settled down, that they would either plant a single tree or be gifted 2 trees as a sign of their betrothed love and being wed. And these trees would have been great. They're long-living, great source of, if you wanted to do maple sugaring, it would be a great source for sap for that, plus shade for livestock, and or if the house up here was kind of over up on that hill over there. But you see a lot of trees like this. If you have an old house here in New England, there's often a very large tree in the yard, often set down when the family set down roots. You see it a lot in northern Midwest, so Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, especially from the Scandinavian side of things. So, yeah, George and Martha, they're doing well.
Thank you so much.
And I learned too that I know people that had lived in this area a long time ago, the fellas, in their teens, maybe wherever, they go up to Vermont to help with sugaring and may have brought the seedlings down. So there's some of that. There's that genetic gene pool from Vermont.
Because there were not a ton of sugar maples in this area when the Europeans got here in the 1600s. They were mostly west and north of here. So in eastern Massachusetts, there weren't sugar maples here. Sugar maple and getting started. Decent 12, 18-inch wide sugar maple. Look around it and see if you can find these. They look like a boring beetle or a sapsucker hole, but they're all tap scars. And you'll see them mostly between about waist height and shoulder height. Right? Because if you're tapping, you don't want to tap really high up because you can't see what's in the bucket, and if you take it down and it's full, you wear the bucket. Right? And you will see occasionally some weird ones that are high up. It just means there was a lot of snow that year. Right? It's not, you had an exceptionally tall sugarer that year. We have one in the Norway maple in the front yard at the Nature Center. Vin's the only one who's been tapping there for 15 plus years. There's one from 2015 where the tap's up here because Vin was standing on 2 feet of snow.
So we didn't get far because we had so much to talk about. However, this is the field right between the Cedar Swamp and the Billings Court. You can admire the incredible stone walls and the wild field. By the way, there are tons of things to look at. And here is a picture from about the same spot from 1890s. So this field is pretty incredible and full of nature. There are bluebird houses and you can really admire many butterflies and birds. Gaurav will tell you a little bit more.
Small little thing. That's a praying mantis utica, where the eggs come from. And as I pointed out, they're all over this place. Once you start looking, you'll start seeing many of them. Praying mantises also are introduced here. They're not hunted. If you have to go a little bit further south, I think New Jersey or maybe Connecticut,
So eventually we took the boardwalk to go high up to the bluffs. Once again, we saw some treasures.
Probably a pileated woodpecker.
Yeah. Somebody was busy. Did you say a pig?
Big.
The pig.
And about midway up the hill, you can see huge cylinder-shaped concrete structure, stone and concrete mix. That is actually an old cistern that was used for watering an orchard. Now we are back at the field and we eventually walk on the board. By the way, here we admired Bug Hotel. That's Gaurav, who is entomologist. He couldn't resist, of course. I really want to let you know that we had some amazing chats and we all learn a lot about history and nature, and you are all welcome to join us in the future. So what usually takes us to hike about 40 minutes took us close to 2.5 hours. So this is the boardwalk on the wetland, and Gaurav will tell you a little bit more.
You find, earlier, a couple of weeks ago when I came, I found at least 3 egg masses. And they're not easy to tell apart. Frog egg masses look like bunches of grapes. You have the individual eggs and you have some gelatin over them, but you can see the individual eggs as bumpy parts. Salamander egg masses have the individual eggs and a gelatin that completely covers it, so it's no longer bumpy.
Gaurav, the current president of Sharon Friends of Conservation, is amateur entomologist, and he showed us his incredible new camera, and he took some pictures and shared knowledge about the bugs with us. So, by the way, this time of the year you can see tons of skunk cabbage that grows in the wetlands. The skunk cabbage is a very interesting plant, and it emerges super early and has to be the cold basically. And what is amazing about it is that it can produce its own heat. It can produce enough heat so that the snow is often completely melted around it. Measurements show it can produce heat up to 35 degrees Celsius, which is warmer than the air around it. Pretty cool, right? So I hope you enjoyed this short video. This is just a little peek at the hikes we organize at least once a month. By the way, you don't have to wear merrills to join us. Anyhow, if you would like to join Sharon Historical Society or Sharon Friends of Conservation, you are more than welcome to, but you don't have to be a member to join us for our hikes. You can look at our websites and Facebook pages to follow us for future hikes. Thank you for watching Sharon Local History.